Aryans and Rig Vedic society. So far, we have considered the late Harappan cultures, Chalcolithic and painted grey ware cultures. Let us now turn on the evidence from the Vedic text, which unlikely the archaeological evidences then tells us only about the material culture, throw lights on the ethnic and cultural identities of people. Because of the reference found in the Vedas, the Aryan question is one of the most important issues concerning in early history of India. So the Aryans, who were the Aryans? The attempt to write a history of India begins with the European colonization India. They compiled it, the archaeological and literary sources as well as oral traditions. Certain notions, for example, the Aryans were developed and used in the colonial context, which many parts of Asia and Africa were under the influence of European power. The concept of race was widely prevalent at that time to classify and categorize people. Some of the views reflect the racist idea of colonial times. The Aryan theory was linked to a blue-eyed white race and its connection with Europeans. Nazis used the Aryan concept for the political agenda, ultimately leading to Holocaust. The recent studies have stabilized that the word Aryan does not denote race, but only refers to the original speaker of Indo-Aryan language. So those who speak Indo-Aryan language were Aryans. So philologists study language in oral and written forms of languages. Based on historical evidence, they use etymology, comparatively linguistics, literary criticisms, history and linguistics in their studies. So the Rig Veda is in Sanskrit. About 300 words of the Munda and Dravidian language have been identified in it, suggesting cultural mix with earlier inhabitants. So the Rig Veda, there are some proofs. From the Vedas, it is evident that Aryans used domesticated horses and chariots. Their chariots had spoked wheels, that they used bows and arrows, and they practiced agriculture and pastoralism. They buried and they also cemented the death. The cult of fire and the use of soma drink were prevalent among the speakers of the Indo-Aryan languages. The home of the Indo-European and Indo-Aryan is still a matter of debate. Many scholars are of the view that the Aryans came to India as migrants from Central Asia. It is also believed that several waves of Indo-Aryan migrations might have happened. There are several factors which support this hypothesis. Remember, this is a hypothesis, this is not a truth, but this it is believed and it could be true, it could not be true. So the traits of the cultures of Aryans covered Eastern Europe and Central Asia, which is geographically overlinked with India. So Eastern Europe and Central Asia and West Asia and Europe. One of the accepted areas of Aryan home is Eastern Europe, Central Asia, north of Black Sea. The bacteria Margina archaeological complex is closely related to Aryan culture, dated to 900 BCE, 1500 BCE. Ceramics of South Central Asia archaeological sites resemble those found in Swat Valley. Reference to the name of Indo-European language are found in inscription dated 2200 BCE discovered in the modern Iraq. So they could have been linked to their Iraq and Iran. Anatolian is inscription around 900 to 1700 BCE in Kassite inscription of 1600 BCE Iraq and Mitanni inscription of 1400 BCE in Syria. Bhagosh Goi inscription in referring to names similar to the Vedic gods, referring names similar to Vedic gods around 1400 BCE have the common features of the Indo-European language, but no such inscription are found in India. The term Ashwa and several other terms in Rig Veda have common roots in various Indo-Aryan languages. In the Rig Veda, the term Ashwa, horse, occurs 215 times and Rishvabha, bull, 170 times. Tiger and rhinoceros, which are tropical animals, are not mentioned in the Rig Veda. There is no trace of urban way of life in the Rig Veda. Hence, the identity of Aryan is not correlated with the Harappan culture. So, Harappan culture were local people of our land, but Those who have linked with the Rig Veda are not of this land. I think this could be inferred. But where there is no evidence for horse nowadays, DNA studies are also used for understanding ancient migration. So M17, a genetic marker DNA, is said to have been found among the speaker of Indo-European. So now talking about Rig Vedic culture, it was all about Aryan. So we have completed almost a page. I think our heading was the Aryan and Rig Vedic society. So let us know about the Rig Vedic society. How was society at that time? So Rig Vedic Samhita, remember word Samhita is the earliest text that relates to early Vedic period. The early Vedic period is placed between 1500 to 1000 BCE. The political, social and economical aspects of life of this period are reflected in Rig Vedic hymns. The geography of Indian subcontinent. The early Aryan lived in the area of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Punjab and Fringe. So the Aryan who first came from outside, they live in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Punjab and in eastern western Uttar Pradesh. And Dasas and Dasyus, the Rig Vedas speak about not only the Aryans but also about non-Aryans, the local people whom the Aryans encountered in India. Aryan encountered. When the Rig Vedic society, Rig Vedic people moved into India, they come into conflict with the people whom they inferred as the Sioux or Dasas. Evidently, the Aryans differentiated themselves from the dark natives. So the local people were dark, native people were dark, who had different cultural practices and sought to maintain their distinction. So I am also dark. Rig Veda had references to several other groups. Simyu and Kikata are grouped with the Dasyus. Simyu and Kikata. Samara, son of Kulitra, is mentioned as a chief of 90 forts of settlements. Virchin was another chief with many troops. The Rig Veda mentions the defeat of the chief called Shambhara by Devadasha of the Bharata clan. Polity and political classes. The concept of polity developments in the Rig Vedic time. Various units of habitations and divisions such as Janas, Vishganas, Grama, Kula are referred to in the Rig Veda. The Vedas speak about the Aryans and their enemies and the battles they fought with them. The battles were fought more for cattle and materials, wealth, and war booty acquired was shared. They not only fought with the non-Aryans but also fought among themselves. They invoked the support of gods in their battles. They strongly believed that the prayers, sacrifices and rituals could offer support to their mundane life. The god Indra in Purandra, which means destroyer of settlements which were perhaps fenced off planned ownership. So what is term Jana means? Tribe. The term Jana means tribe. So the Bharatas and Tritsu, remember Tritsu, were the ruling Aryans clans who were supported by Vasishtha, the priest. The region of India was named Bharata Varsha after the tribe of Bharatas. So the Bharata clan was opposed by the 10 chiefs and 5 out of them were Aryans. This battle was known as the Battle of 10 Kings. The battle took place on the bank of the river Parusni, identified with the river Ravi. In this battle, Sudhas won and became important, leading and dominion of Bharata clan. The Purush were one of the defeated clans. The Purush and Bharatas formed alliance and later they formed Kuru clan. Later the Kuru aligned with Panchala and stabilizes their control over the upper Ganga Valley. So talking about social divisions of this Vedic society, the Vedic people distinguished themselves from the non-Aryan people. So the Vedic people distinguished themselves that they are separate. Varna was term used by Aryans to refer the color of the category. The Rig Veda referred to Aryan Varna and Das Varna. Thus Dasas and Dasyus were conquered and treated as slaves. They were conquered and treated as slaves. They come to consider Sudras in the later period. and those dasas were considered sudras in the later period. Social classes were classified as warrior, priest, and common people. Sudras as a category of people appeared at the end of the Vedic period. Slavery was common and slaves were given as gifts to the priest, but there is no reference to the wage labor. Large drawn chariots, and bronze objects was possessed by a few, suggesting social distinctions. Vedic society was largely egalitarian initially, and social distinctions emerged later. According to the Purusha Sukta of the Rig Veda, the various varnas emerged thus: Brahmanas from the mouth, and the Kshatriyas from the arms, and the Vaishyas from the thighs, and the Sudras from the feet of the Purusha. When when he was sacrificed, the social divisions are considered to have arisen towards the end of the early Vedic period. So the social divisions was the main cause of decline end of the Vedic period. And various professions, groups such as warriors, priests, cattle keepers, farmers, barbers, and are also mentioned. Panis were entirely traders, and perhaps Karnavas traders. Panis are also seen as enemies in some Varsas. Talking about tribes and the family of the Vedic period. So the kinship were the basis of the social structure of the Vedic society. People were identified with specific clans, and the clans formed as the tribes of Jana. So that Jana was the group of the tribal people. The term Jana occurs in the Rig Veda 21 times, but Janapada does not even occur once. The term which refers to the common people occurred 117 times. Had they lived in Gramas, villages, and the family Griha was the main social unit within the tribe. It was headed by the Grihapati, and his wife was popularly known as Sapatni. And the family at that point of time was perhaps a giant family. So this is about the family structure of that time. Now talking about the women, women had a respectable position, but it is not possible to generalize about this. Society was essentially patriarchal with the preference of male children and cattle. The birth of a son was preferred, perhaps because of the martial nature of the society, which required the male members for their classes to establish dominance over the territories. Having 10 sons was considered as blessings. Women attended assemblies and offered sacrifices. Marriage was common, but primitive practices were also continued. Polyandry seems to have existed, as widow remarriage was also known. So polyandry and widow marriage was there. People married at the age of 16, 17 according to the scholars, and there is little evidence of child marriage. So talking about economy and agriculture, the archaeological evidences point to the development of agriculture along the Vedic period. The plowshare is mentioned in the Rig Vedas. The field was known as Kshetras, and the term Krishi referred to plugging. The term Langala and Sura refer to plug. The term Sita means the furrow cheated by ploughing. Water for irrigation was probably drawn from wells by cattle driven water left using pulleys. They had knowledge of different seasons, sowing, harvesting, and threshing. They cultivated barley, yam, and wheat, gundhuma. Pastoralism, cattle rearing, was an important economic activity to the Aryans. Although they practiced agriculture, cattle were considered wealth. The term for war in the Rig Veda was Gavishti, which means search for cows. So, which is contemporary term Goshti for fractions as well. The donation of the priests were mainly cows, and the women slaves. Women slaves, but not land, which reveals the importance of pastoralism. There was no private property in land. We're talking about craft production. The Rig Veda mentions artisans such as carpenters, chariot makers, weavers, and leather workers. Copper metallurgy was one of the important developments of this period. The term ayas in the Rig Veda refers to the copper and bronze. The term ayas in the Rig Veda refers to the copper and bronze. Karmaraj myth is mentioned in the Rig Veda. Likewise, there are references in Siri or Yarn indicating spinning, which was done by women and carpenters. Takshan. Weaving of cloths of wool is also referred to, and obviously it was necessary in the cold weather. Some of the crafts were full-time crafts involving specialists. We're talking about trade, exchange, and redistribution. So trading activity were limited, so the traders were present during the early Vedic period. Panis, also referred to as traders, and they were perhaps caravan traders. So here is a word caravan traders. The term pan means barter, which was mode of exchange. So barter system was before this. Its exchange. Nishka was gold or silver ornaments used in the barter. The priest received 100 horses and 100 nishka as silver as a fee for sacrifice. The danas and dakshinas referred to the people by means of redistributing resources. The dakshina was bought of a fee for a specific service and also means of distributing wealth. The distribution of cow helped spread pastoral activities and economic productions. Now, transport. For the transport, bullock carts, horses, and horse-drawn chariots were used for the transport. There are also references to the sea. Samudra. The boats, now boats driven by 100 oars, are mentioned. Now, talking about polity and administration, the polity of the Vedic period was that of the tribal society. The chief of the tribe was the main political head and was called Raja. The king lived in multi-pillared places. They offered gifts of the cattle, chariots, and horse ornaments and gold to the priest. Rajan was a hereditary chief. He was perhaps elected by the assembly called Samiti. The main duty of the king was to protect the tribe. He protected wealth, fought wars, and offered prayers on the behalf of gods. The king had authority over the country and people. The Vedic society was militaristic. Bows, daggers, axes, and lances were the main weapons of the war. Tributaries and booty collected from the war were redistributed by the king. There are also references to the gift of dasas or slaves. The king Trasdasyu, the chief of the Purus, gave away 50 women as a gift. So the chief was known as Gopa, the Gopati, which means chief of cattle. The assembly called Sabha, Samiti, Vidhata and Gana are mentioned in the Rig Veda. Sabha was the assembly of elders or the elites. Samiti was the assembly of people, and Vidhata was the assembly of tribes. They performed military and religious functions. Women attended the Shubhas and Vedatas. The kings sought his support of the Samiti and Sabha for his activity. They also debates about the exact nature of the assembly and functions. Most of the understanding of the conditions of the Vedic society depends upon the interpretations of various terms. Sometimes it is hard to construct the original meaning. The Purohita or the priest offered advice to the king. Vedic priest advised the king, inspired them, and praised their deeds. In turn, they received reward for their service. Senani was with the chief of the army. There is no evidence of the tax collecting officer. Perhaps people made a voluntary contribution called Bali to the kings. Some scholars may say that Bali was an imposed tax, but not voluntary. There is no reference of the administration of the justice. The officer who controlled the territory was called Prajapati, that helped the Kulapas and head of the fighting group to the Gramini. Gramini was the head of the village and fighting units. So this is all about the administration and the Vedic religion and rituals. हेलो
हेलो।
हाँ भाई
हाँ यस सर, कैसे हैं आप?
ठीक है
पहचाना?
नहीं बताओ
राज।
अरे राज भाई कैसे हो हाँ
बढ़िया यार।
बढ़िया यार बहुत दिन बाद आप किए हो कहाँ हो